Hey, Paul Monahan here. Welcome to the Most Important Game podcast. My mission is to help you lead and play better, struggle less, and enjoy more. And in this podcast, we have a conversation with Cinzia Lee. Cinzia is a mindfulness and meditation expert in Australia, has an unbelievably fascinating background. She came to us live from Western Australia in, as she says, I think she said the most remote city in the world, Perth, Australia. At any rate, lots of great discussion around what it takes to perform at your best, around the importance and the value and the benefit of a mindfulness approach, a meditation approach. And I think you'd be surprised at the background that she brings to the space and a lot of the comments and ideas. And at the very, very end, a nice, quick, little easy prompt for anybody who is interested in elevating your mental game in any performance realm. So, all right, here we go. All right, Cinzia, great to see you. That smile all the way from Perth, Australia. What day is it? What time is it? I don't even know. Like, what's going on?
Good point. No, it is Tuesday morning and it is 8:24 a.m. Here in Perth.
Still Monday in the Midwest, as you know.
Yes.
Anyway, great to have you. I want to jump right in, Cinzia. I want to know, what is a warrior mindset?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say a warrior mindset is an ability to really become a master of your own mind. And when we look at, especially in high performance arenas, we look at physical, we look at tactical, and it's so important to have that mental side of things. And I would also say spiritual. So it really is, it's also a calling, I would say, when we look at, say, for instance, Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. I mean, I watched Rocky again last night. I love that film so much. I mean, really, it's such a great film.
It's a hero's journey.
It is a hero's journey. But when we look at that as well, we look at, say, for instance, archetypes, and warrior is an archetype. And for the longest time, I've been a real voice for warriors, because I think we've seen this pattern in society, especially to, say, for instance, call warriors as a whole things like, toxic masculine and all these things. And what we're forgetting, though, is that warrior is an archetype, just like a teacher, just like a baker, a butcher. And we need all of those archetypes in order to keep the legs on the table. And removing an archetype is just not cohesive to the tapestry of our life. So I would also say it's a calling, but it's definitely an ability to prepare, to face what is in front of us, to overcome obstacles, to adapt, and to thrive. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Who needs a warrior mindset?
Oh, I mean, we all do. But especially, in high performance, when you're looking at first responders, when you're looking at elite athletes, special forces, it's funny, there's a book that I really love called Warrior Mindset. Lieutenant Akshay, I bought a copy to swing around.
Let's do it. There we go.
I love it so much. And so Lieutenant Dave Grossman he's really incredible. He talks a lot about the psychology behind lethal force in a way. I met him through a colleague of mine. Not met him. I was introduced to his work through a colleague of mine that's very close to him. And they talk about a study where they talk about mental preparedness, and they looked at a police department in the States, and they found that people that were mentally unprepared, 75% of their outcomes tactically were luck, whereas mentally prepared, it was the other way around. And I think when you're looking at studies like that, it's so important to stop and go, wow, there's something really, there's an opportunity there. Yeah.
So what is mental preparedness then?
Well, I guess For me, like mental preparedness is the ability to be able to, there's lots of different facets to things. So there's definitely an ability to emotionally regulate, to physically regulate. Visualize is a huge part of mental preparedness, and also to become comfortable with uncertainty. And to, I was listening to the first chapter of your book. Is it too early to do a plug? But,
This moment. Oh, we have a sponsor moment.
Yeah.
Brought to you by.
Yeah, that's right. But, you were talking about faith and discipline. And so when we're mentally prepared, it means that when we're facing obstacles, when we are stepping into something that has the potential for our body to go into what I call an emotional tell. So we all feel that emotional tell differently. Like if I'm feeling nervous, or if I feel like I'm facing, we talk about in the hero's journey, the dragon, I feel it through here. That's where I feel it. Whereas some people will clench their fists, they'll sweat. There's lots of different things that can happen to people. And it's that ability, and this is where mindfulness comes in, it's the ability to become aware that we're having that response, and therefore make a choice of how we're going to show up in that moment. And being mentally prepared is the key to all of that, because you can be physically prepared, but in that moment, if you are going to, as we would say in Australia, like poop your pants, or you're going to become very flustered and overwhelmed, and all of those skill sets that you've learnt tactically or physically can just go straight out the window. So, you would know, I was listening to your interview with the great Bob Schultz, and you were asking him.
The legendary.
Yeah,
yes.
right. But you were asking him, what is it that he's going to do to be prepared for the next time he goes onto the golf course? And it really is that ability to go, I know that there are areas I can clean up blind spots. There are areas where I can visualize the shot that's going to happen, where I can increase my focus, where, I can know that really being where your feet are is the most important thing, I think. Yeah. And that comes from here first.
Nice. So is it a little bit about, it sounds like it's a little bit about two things. It's about the skills like visualizing, for example, that we can work on and bring to the performance domain that we're stepping into or a part of, right? Mm-hmm. And it also sounds like it's also a mindset, right? It's developing the mindset to see things as they come at you or as you move toward them, however you want to frame it. It's about seeing reality as you experience it in ways so that you can stay productive.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of like, for me, we cook a meal at the beginning of the day, say breakfast, and we prepare that meal. We enjoy that meal, but we also need to clean up the meal afterwards. And so as we become aware of, say, blind spots or things that are no longer productive, if we cannot judge that and we can say, oh, this is part of this learning process, then we can clean up those blind spots, or we can clean that dish. And I think there's an acceptance of that. And also, I would say the ability to have that pause between the stimulus and the response. And we train things like that through techniques like just comfortably sitting with your own breath and noticing that gap and that pause between the in-breath and the out-breath. Because that's that ripple effect of then how we show up in situations that can be uncertain, or that can be agitated, or where we're feeling those emotional tells in our body. If that answered your question. I get very passionate and I'm like,
yeah, that's great. No, I feel like all I have to do is say, Cinzia, here's a question, and I'll come back, believe me, in a half an hour, and I will have written like 9 pages. It's so good. There's so many great parts of this. It's like, all right, as I think about the folks that I work with inside of the golf space, but anybody inside of a performance domain, it could be music, it could be, certainly could be leadership, being part of a team, understanding how, what's happening as a leader when the team is looking to you in the middle of a really hard challenge. There's techniques that are, it's like, you can practice, you can build the skills so that you are the one person in the middle of chaos that can help inspire some really good things rather than add to the chaos. So I think that's, I love that. That's great.
It's really, I wish I had my tin with me. I've got it in the other room, but one day I wandered into this tea store in a place called the Strand Arcade in Sydney. And if anyone ever goes to Sydney, I highly recommend. It's just a beautiful, multi-leveled, old heritage mall. Like it's like a beautiful little, there's shops and it's very quaint. And I walked in one day and I was missing my mum. She passed away 9 years ago. And I walked into this tea store that we would go to together when I was, she would come over and visit me while I was doing Jersey Boys, the musical. And I walked in and the gentleman was just very perceptive. And he said, "Oh, are you okay?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just having this moment of missing my mom." And he took me to this tea. I really enjoy very, very good tea because tea can be very mindful, in the process of making it. And
mind if I sip on my
go
apple
for it.
Cinnamon tea right now?
Love it, absolutely. And he got this tin out, and it was a mountain with it's painted, hand painted, and it was a mountain with some snow on the top. And he said to me, "Be the mountain." And I looked at him and he said, "You have that. I know you have that capacity in you. So no matter what is swirling around you, you be the mountain. The seasons will change. Animals will come. Sometimes they'll land on you. There could be storms and clouds. And he said, be the mountain." And that to me has always, always stuck with me. And I guess the first part of being the mountain is understanding yourself and being accountable, authentic, and So I think that in leadership, that's getting back to what you were saying, how do we help people understand that they can be the mountain, they can be the calm in the chaos, and that comes from that preparedness of how do I give space between this stimulus and response. Is what I'm feeling right now a familiar reaction to something that's happened years ago in my life, or patterns that keep showing up? So, I've noticed this. I've noticed that blind spot. Okay, I'm not going to judge myself about that, but I know that's something that can go into the needs work basket. And, and that's how I think we meet the moment. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. And I always appreciate the language that you use around all of this. So I'm really having a lot of fun, and we're really early into this conversation. So
just dive right in.
I know there's a lot more to come for sure. I do want to understand and help the listener and the viewer understand, all right, how did you get into this space?
Yeah.
Tell us your story. Where did you grow up?
Right.
Maybe what performance domains were a part of your own development and your own journey, your own hero's journey, right? We all have one.
Yeah.
And let's not leave out the music stuff, because I really want to dive into that too.
For sure, yeah. So I guess I almost see my life as two different parts, and since my mum passed away 9 years ago, and I guess that I grew up in Perth in Western Australia, and it's the most isolated city in the world, which is such a wild thing to think about. It's also
crazy?
bizarrely windy, but we forget that. We have this thing called the Fremantle Doctor. So in summer when it gets hot, this breeze comes in to cool down the land. But what it does is like as soon as that kicks in, you can't really be on the beach because it's like the sand, whereas in Bondi, I've spent half my life in Sydney as well, and a lot of my life in Bondi, very, very different. You know, there's no wind, breeze. You might go to the beach at 5 p.m. But yeah,
Feels
I feel
a little tropical and all that.
a little bit, yeah. But just really fortunate where I grew up, to be honest. I grew up in a suburb called South Perth, surprisingly south of Perth. So we had a South Perth, East Perth, West Perth and North Perth were actual suburbs because people are like, oh, you're in South Perth. So where is that? I'm like, South Perth.
The founding fathers of Perth were, they were brilliant. What can you say?
They really were. But yeah, on the river and across from the city, and it's just a very beautiful leafy green suburb. My family, so my mum grew up in a country town south of Perth, and my grandmother actually, so down the line, is this going too far back? Let me just
kidding? No, this is.
And my great-great-grandfather landed on Gallipoli. So he did.
Exactly. Well, the Americans want to know, go all the way back in the lineage to find the criminal,
Okay.
Because obviously, at some point,
do you know what? I don't know. I'm sure that there is somewhere, but I come from a lineage. So Marshall Waller Clifton, he actually came across as part of the military and planted a flag and colonised. So I'm not too sure about the convict side of my family. It's nothing that is there is nothing that has been discussed, but as far as I know, it came from more of the military side. And
23andMe, we can figure that out.
Right. Yeah, totally. But yeah, and I did everything really that I wanted to do growing up. I was always really drawn to dance, to sport, or was always like a representative at school of things. And I came from a family. So my mum was a sort of a foundation skydiver in Western Australia and Australia, and she was, the first woman in Australia to do 1,000 jumps. And back then that took like 10 years, right? The reserves are on the front and all those sorts of things. My dad, so she represented Australia. My dad also used to test the parachutes for, he was the like crash test dummy for.
How did you get that job?
Volunteering, no doubt. And so grew up.
Just jump out. Maybe it'll pop open. Maybe it won't. We're just testing it.
Yeah. So around those sorts of things, a lot. Skydiving. Mum gave up when I was born, but just around those sort of spheres, a lot. Like I love the smell of like avgas and like poured on a gravel pit and lit on fire, and
100
all those,
low lead.
Yeah, I feel very comfortable in those environments. A lot of our best family friends were leaders within the Special Air Service Regiment. So our Special Forces, are here in Western Australia is the Special Air Service Regiment now. It became a regiment in 1964 during Borneo, actually. We also have our commandos over the East Coast. But yeah, so, and for me, I just always knew I wanted to do musical theatre. Like when I was a baby, I would hold on to the table and bounce to like Life is Like a Butterfly by Dolly Parton till my nappy like fell off, and Mum was like, I don't know where she gets this from, like no one in the family's musical. And so she had the foresight to put me into this dance school called Talent 2000. That's given away my age. And so because that was seen as like, in the distant future when we're all like, the Jetsons. Yeah.
That's so far.
That's right.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
We'll be flying in our cars.
Yeah. And so I just, pursued that. That was a passion of mine. I loved it very much. And, and I'm just trying to think what else. Just really active in
musical theatre.
sports.
Can I ask about musical theatre for a second?
For sure.
Sorry to interject.
No, go for it.
All right. So musical theater, I think Broadway, but does everybody think Broadway? I mean, is there? Yeah, right away. Okay, we go to Broadway I gotcha. So I think I had mentioned it. So our son Kevin, who is in music in Nashville, Tennessee, primarily in the country space, but I was talking to him the other day, and I'm like, I had listened to the soundtrack of Pippin.
Oh.
And have you ever listened to that?
Oh, yeah. I think I was in Pippin in high school.
I was going to say.
What about your life?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Corner of the sky.
Yeah.
I mean, got to find my corner of the sky. Well, and it's such a classic, too, because that's let's see, Stephen Schwartz wrote the music for that. Stephen Schwartz of Wicked fame we can bring that all the way to modern times, but it's like the early 70s. It's Ben Vereen. It's Bob Fosse of Chicago. Like he was the director.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just all of this crazy stuff. And so Kevin and his girlfriend Anna, like they're in this space so much, and they're listening to different kinds of music all the time. And I said, Kevin, do you remember listening to Pippin when you were a kid? Because I had it on all the time. And he's like, yeah, I totally remember it, And I'm like, but he hasn't listened to it in like 15 years. Maybe longer, gosh. And so I kind of turned him over, and I'm like, turn it back onto that. I'm like, all right, on your next trip, I think they're taking a trip this week. And I'm like, all right, download or get on Spotify, download the songs, and listen to that track. It's just incredible.
Oh, definitely. I think that musical theatre really came from that vaudeville. Initially that's really what it was about. It came from, when you look at old musicals like Carousel and things like that, it's because speaking just wasn't enough to convey an emotion. I have to sing. Singing is where, like I love old school, musicals. I love Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, which is so inappropriate now. It's like, throw them over your shoulder and then, create a big, a big landslide.
Yeah.
But
can we still do that one? I don't know.
The choreography, like Michael Kidd and the barn raising, and I love, Singing in the Rain, and I loved Grease growing up.
Wait, Michael Kidd choreographed that?
Didn't he? Seven Brides for Seven Brothers? Or who did Seven Brides for Seven Brothers? Are you on the Google?
I was going to look that up because
was it Michael Kidd? No, because and he did West Side Story.
Yeah. I mean, it's very seriously. I would say, there you go. There he is. Okay. Yeah, there you go. You got it. 100%. I wasn't doubting it for a second, but Michael Kidd was a name from growing up in where I grew up, and he was in theater. He was a theater guy. Later, he spent a career in it. So that's interesting that you brought that up.
So, and I just think there was something do you know what? It's kind of like the same way I feel about movies. Like I watch, Rocky and say Moonstruck and Field of Dreams and all those old school films, and I feel like there was just this heart to them and this storyline, and watching these old musicals and the choreography, and it's something just so special about them. And I just knew I was locked on, and I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And regardless of the roadblocks that came up, because there were, I watched, like Joseph Campbell talks about, follow your bliss and the universe will open doors where there were only walls. And that's just what continuously happened for me. And I was really blessed to be able to see what I wanted, to know what I wanted, and, it unfolded. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Such a great, that musical theater space, I think, is such a great domain. It's really cool that was a big part of your own.
Yeah,
your own journey.
It really was. And I think just that, I've spoken about before, but I remember being in New York and watching Jersey Boys from the August Wilson Theatre in the very back row, and I thought, this is the best show I've ever seen. And I looked down and there were 3 roles for women in the show, and I was like, I'm going to play that role in Australia. And I looked up her name in the program, and it was Italian, just like mine is. I visualised my name in it. When they came to Australia to audition, initially the Australian casting director had put me up for another role. And when the American casting director saw me, she's like, oh, no, she's Lorraine. And then it came down to when it first initially got cast, I got down right to the end and it was given to someone else. And at that time, it was so confusing because I felt so sure about it. But then 8 months later, she got poached to play Mary Poppins, and I got a phone call. And 2.5 weeks later, I was playing that role in Australia, and it was a dream come true. So, meeting, Frankie Valli and Neil Diamond, and performing, on the Opera House forecourt in Australia, it's a really big thing for New Year's Eve. We have all those fireworks off the Harbour Bridge, and just watching all of those things, and just knowing that sometimes, it really is, we can plant those seeds of intention, but sometimes when it's time to pick the harvest, it can be a collaboration between us and whatever you believe, like God, the universe, spirit. Yeah,
So as you think about that being in that space for you, I am really curious, like, what was it like? Because I'm sure that you would perform 7, 8 shows a week, or right? I mean, it's a grueling kind of
yes, it
right?
is. Yeah.
So how do you stay up for that? Number one, and then what are some of the performance challenges? And I'm curious about this. And we talked about this a little bit before. It's like, okay, the mental preparedness, how you build your skill so that you can step into that space. I think you said, hey, can I be where my feet are, right? I'm sure all these things must have been emerging for you as you were in that performance space. I wonder if you talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're at that level and that elite level, people forget how it can be on the body, how it can be mentally. And so there's a few different things that would go on. Obviously, vocally we have, when you're doing 8 shows a week, and basically they changed a roster. This thing happened between the union and the producers. And the producers decided they wanted to make more money over weekends so that they could get more interstate guests. So rather than normally in a theatre, Monday is always what they call a black day. That's the day off in the theatre. You would normally have a Tuesday performance, 2 on a Wednesday, like a Wednesday matinee, Thursday, Friday, just the nights, then the Saturday 2 and a Sunday. So that would give you sort of like that Sunday evening all the way through into Monday into Tuesday. So they changed these rosters. So we were doing 5 shows within 48 hours. So 2 on a Saturday, 2 on a Sunday. So from Monday night to Sunday night, we were doing 5 shows in 48 hours, and then just 1 day off on a Monday. That was quite challenging, especially because my part. So say, for instance, I'm not sure, I've never really thought about the comparison between, say, positions on a football team, but the part that I was given vocally was very high and so therefore it was very, it took a lot to upkeep my vocal cords to be able to sing that repetitive nature.
You were way up in that register.
Over and over and over again. And so basically I couldn't talk on Mondays at all. Therefore, it kind of takes out of the equation relationships with people that are outside of musical theatre, because people can't really catch up on a Monday anyway. They're all, most of them are in office jobs. But so that was interesting. You're also, the same as, in elite sport, you're missing weddings, you're missing birthdays. But physically, I'd be doing things like running. I would do reformer Pilates, watching what you eat. And I think the thing is for us, and one thing we always fought really hard for was proper footwear, because sometimes you'd be put in footwear that looked good, but it was bought from a store rather than it being made for your feet. And so they were the sort of things like some of our boys, because they stamped their feet a lot and there was sort of some metal rods in the shoes and things were happening. So there's a few different things like that, things that you wouldn't understand unless you were in that, for a long time. But one thing also I was going to say that's really interesting, and that was the first show that I'd done. I'd done Greece and arenas and tours and stuff, but that was the first long-running show I'd done. So for almost 2 years in Sydney and Melbourne. And that's seen as like the pinnacle of what we do in Australia. But you're doing the same thing 8 times a week for nearly 2 years. And it's kind of like one football team playing another football team with the same result, and you only play that same team with the same result 8 times a week forever. And mentally that's really interesting. And I remember being on stage once and having this, what I could describe as an out-of-body experience. I was in the middle of singing My Boyfriend's Back. And of course, like it's dark. You can't see the audience. So sometimes you're sort of like, I wonder, I could be home right now, like in my bathroom. Yeah. Anyway, and I sort of was going through,
Did
obviously
I leave the iron on?
Yeah. And I left my kind of body. This would have been probably a year into the run. And I was thinking that like, I can't see them and anyway. And I came kind of back into my body at the end and I was like, my boyfriend's back. And I was like, because I didn't, it was the most bizarre thing. So there'd be sometimes things like that would happen in a long running show. So mentally you're sort of looking at things like that as well. But there's some people on Broadway that have been doing like Chicago for 20 years. But I think they change roles. I think it's a different union thing going over there. But yeah, anyway. So lots of different things in play, but definitely, physical and mental for sure. Yeah.
What's one thing you'd say to somebody who was about to start a 2-year run like you did?
Yeah.
Inside of a show? What would be something that you'd say to them to help them prepare?
Right. I would say, first of all, your mic is always on. So just remember that. Once the mic is placed on you, it's always on. It doesn't matter whether you're on stage or not. There's people listening all the time. We were never taught that in performing arts school, and I think that's really important, But also make sure you have those what are your pillars or what are your dimensions of well-being in your life, and having relationships, outside of work and having hobbies, having all those things, that's really important too. So think about those things, about cultivating and keeping the relationships outside of the industry that you're in. And knowing, like being really aware of things that you can have, like nutrition-wise, to keep you sustained as well. Yeah. Quite often you'd see people on double show days, like laying down somewhere, just having like a Coke and a bag of lollies, just trying to keep that to get through, So, yeah.
I know that we have the Burger King franchise here, and I forget what it is.
Hungry Jack's.
Hungry Jack's, exactly.
Yeah.
There was a group in Cleveland a few weeks ago, and spending a little bit of time at the Cleveland Guardians, so I was part of a small little group, and they brought these hats. It was actually it's a group of footy coaches, right? AFL coaches, and actually is it the Perth Tigers? No, I'm going to get it completely wrong.
We have the West Coast Eagles are our AFL team.
The West Coast Eagles.
Yeah, Tigers are an NRL team. So that's the other ball.
Okay. So it's the Eagles. That's the blue cap with the gold
Correct.
eagle. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So one of the coaches from the Eagles was with that group, and he had hats for us all. And it has the 100. I wish I had it. It's in another office, but he's got the Hungry Jack logo.
Oh yeah.
And we all thought that was fantastic. Like, wait a minute, looks like Burger King.
Yeah, it is.
But
you're like, it is Burger King, just a different name. It's just more Australian, apparently.
That's great. So all right, so that's insane. Like to me, that's an insane performance environment. Broadway.
It is. And you definitely,
music theater.
Yeah, for sure. Like you'll find that over time, like they just have to keep taking your costumes in and in and in and in because you're just physically.
Really?
Like I had, you know, once it started, especially Jersey Boys, we moved all the sets as well. So once it started, it was like a roller coaster. I had 21 costume changes in one show. It was like the physically, and you're singing the whole time because we would double Frankie Valli backstage to create the effect of double tracking. So we were singing his parts with him whilst we're like getting changed and while we're doing so yeah, it was, yeah, it's incredible. I love the behind the scenes stuff. That's the best.
Wow, that's crazy. I do have to ask because my wife Paula and I we had an experience about a year or so ago, and we went and saw Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen it. I grew up, gosh, I was probably 10 years old listening to that music. And we saw it from the second row. Absolutely the most incredible experience. I'm just curious if you've seen that show. And
I'm familiar with it. I haven't seen it in the flesh. We've just got a new version touring Australia at the moment. But I'm definitely familiar with the show. Yeah.
Yeah, I think rock opera is the absolutely perfect name for it because it's just there's no spoken words, right? It's just all music. And anyway,
yeah.
All right, so when does the music theater career wind down, and how does that happen? And I'm also curious, like how because meditation and mindfulness is so much a part of what you're doing today. I'm curious how that starts to come into play.
Yeah. So I think like alongside of the musical theatre, I got into media, radio and producing sport. So I became a sport producer working on like our top sporting show in Australia, in Sydney. And from that, I moved across into television, producing what's called the footy show here, the NRL footy show. And so that was kind of running alongside that other career, you know, and I was doing voiceovers as a voiceover artist and all those sorts of things. So I had a media side to my life that was also going alongside. And it was also that, ironically, that led to me starting to meditate. I've always worked heavily in that realm, sort of heavily male environments, always very comfortable in those environments. And I feel very at home with a band of brothers. And but on one show that I was working on, there was it's always weird talking. It's weird talking about this, but there was somebody that he was behind. Let's just say his position was behind the scenes, so it certainly wasn't like a player or coach or anything like that. And you know, he'd had a couple of brews one night and just sort of decided to offer me an invitation. And I was like, no, we're good, brother, you know, everything's okay. But I will preface this by also saying I never felt like threatened or I never felt anything like that. But
sure.
I was like, oh, no, we're all good, you know, thanks for the offer, but we're all good. And so I just sort of got on.
Thank you for the offer,
yeah,
but we're good.
We're good. Yeah. And so I just sort of got on with everything and never, you know, you don't need to speak about anything like that. There's no reason to. It's just to you know, adults that, there was never anything that was, you know, malicious in that moment. So anyway, I just got on with life. But unfortunately, he did not take it the same way. And so made my life progressively more challenging at work. And that was quite distressing for me because I hadn't said anything to anyone. You know, it created a ripple effect of him speaking not well about me, and it changed the way some people were treating me. And that was really, really hard. And so it made me really good at my job in a way because, say, for instance, I'd be allowed 1:40 for a piece and they'd be allowed 5 minutes. But what it did is made me really good at my job because I had to become very discerning and cut down things. And so in that way it was good. But I decided that I just needed to have some – I loved my job as well, like I really did. And so I realised I needed to have some tools and techniques to be able to cope. And also I don't know where this came from, but I wanted to understand why people behaved the way they did and have compassion towards that. And so I took myself off to learn how to meditate. And I started with 20 minutes and it really changed my life, and it helped so much. And so I'm grateful for it. You know, I was listening when I heard your interview with Bob, and he was mentioning how Jocko talks about good, you know, when something happens, good. Something that is an obstacle or adversity, it's good. And I'd really started to learn to say thank you. And I was like, I know that there will be a blessing in this. And even though that sounds insane to most people, and especially when you know that so when we talk about like strengths and values testing, and, you know, when I look at my top 5, when I first did that, it was so eye-opening. It probably happened 3 years ago for me, where I saw my top 5 strengths. And within that top 5 was justice. Justice was really high, and it helped me to understand a lot of how my life has unfolded, the way that I see the world as well. And for me, I would often get distressed in situations where things felt unjust. I was like, this just is so not fair, and this is, you know, anyway. So, but within situations, there are such incredible opportunities. And, you know, it's only through looking back on our life that we can see how things have unfolded, right, for the greatest good, I guess you would say. But at the time it can be quite challenging. So anyway, I started to meditate, and so I started doing 20 minutes of that, and I started to understand, okay, so this other person, is having, you know, trouble at home, and this other person's kids don't speak to them, and this other person it doesn't make it okay, but there are reasons behind, say, people's behaviour that isn't what I would call, you know, top notch. But yeah, anyway, so that led me on that journey. Then I started to travel with it, going through to, I was in Brazil. That's where I was first landed in my first 5-hour meditation. And I must say that walking out of a 5-hour meditation, it's like you're on another planet. And if someone tries to talk to you, you sort of don't have words, you don't have, and basically what happened was through that journey, I ended up moving home when I had a marriage separation, and I moved home to Perth, and my mum passed away really quickly. The barracks stepped in to really help support me through that. And being back around that Special Forces family, they were sort of like, so what is it? Can you teach us more about what you're doing? And, you know, I just continued that journey and my training in it. And, you know, I guess that's how it all started to unfold. And then I would opt into things like being part of scientific studies to do it, you know, to do with meditation. I went to study with Deepak Chopra at La Costa, which we know is is it still on the PGA tour, La Costa?
It is. It's on the Rhoda. It's one of the.
Okay.
It is. Yes.
Yeah.
It would be. Yeah. It was. It's that's Palm Springs area, right?
It's Carlsbad.
Oh, that's Carlsbad. Okay. So that's San Diego. Yeah. Okay.
And so, you know, through that, I was able to be part of an incredible study with the University of San Francisco on the regrowing of telomeres, you know, the end strands of the DNA. And, you know, those needles were really, I keep going, those needles were really big. But, you know, those sorts of things are incredible. And, you know, being in Mexico, sitting in 11-hour meditations overnight and being hooked up to, you know, EEGs and different things like that, Heart Math Institute, and just diving right into all of this stuff, becoming a teacher. And one of the officers said to me, "Can you teach us?" And the rest is history.
Nice. Wow. So you dive in, and over a period of time, like you are in the deep end, and you are completely committed. Love it. That's so cool. And so today you continue to do work with special teams or special forces, right, in that community. Like, what would be something that would be a typical kind of engagement that you would have with that group?
I mean, it really depends. I do a lot of work with individuals. And so I know one thing that, we'd really discussed with Bob as well is this. Sometimes I feel like there's a hole in the net of some of the high performance organizations because I say the guys because that's, who I mainly work with, but they might not feel comfortable going to speak to someone on the record about something, or there might be something that they're wanting to overcome that seems so simple to someone that is outside the wire, but for them it's a fundamental part of their job, and it's being a safe space to be able to come to someone and say, hey, this is actually what's like going on with me, and go, okay, cool, let's sit down, let's look at some tools and techniques to be able to address that and shift that perception and reframe. So, yeah, I mean, it really depends. Like I know, I've, taught the guys coming off selection and going into their Rio, the reinforcement cycle, and that's when they're called the skinny Rios, because a year later, sometimes you can't recognize those guys. Literally, you cannot recognize them because of how skinny they were coming off selection.
Oh, for sure, right?
Yeah.
So they've been in theater, or they've been super active, and then they come out of that.
That's when they first go through selection for the special forces.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And so it's just it's really incredible. So that's how I actually met Roger Herbert, who I think you did the Dolomites with.
I know Roger.
So he was over.
Roger's an intense guy, very interesting for sure.
Yeah, so he was over actually presenting at the time, and so we connected, and he introduced me to Bob. And so that's how I ended up in San Diego. And so, look, it really depends on what's been called for, to be honest. And I see that I teach in two different paths. One is mindful performance and one is mindful awareness. And so mindful performance are those utilizing the tools and techniques to be able to, regulate the breath to whatever needs to be, whether that's you're about to go out on a mission, whether, for shooting, or if it's in football, for instance, that'll be for, kicking a goal or whatever that needs to be. And then, but it's also about how to, just like if you go and shoot a weapon, when you come back, you clean that weapon. There's certain things that you need to do with your equipment, and it's the same with our mind. Otherwise, there's just equipment everywhere, and then there's more equipment the next day, and it's the same in our mind. So it's about being discerning about what do I want to keep from today, what's working, what needs work, what action steps can I take, those sort of things that you would cover as well. And then in the mindful awareness, it's like, how do I leave work at work? How do I switch off at night? Like some of the guys will talk about the fact that it's not until after their first long deployment and a relationship has broken down or something like that, they're like, oh, now I'm starting to understand like the importance of having the balance or having communication with my partner or having a date night. Just simple things, having other aspects of my life that give me joy. So it's sort of multifaceted. I do work with veterans as well. Just finished running a 5-week mindfulness program and mindful awareness program. And we had a gentleman come that he sat in the car for like about 15 minutes, and I'm like, okay. And then he came in with a little notepad and he just said, I've never done anything like this before, but I've been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and I've got a new grandchild and I don't want to die, but I want to be able to deal with the fear that I have that's coming up. And so I'm like, let's go. Let's go. And just to see that transformation over those weeks. And then he said to me, oh, my daughters want to meet you because they want to know who that got me sitting and meditating in a chair of a morning. But he said, you know, when he went for...
Who pulled that off?
Yeah. When he went in for his next medical, he said, I sat in the car, I did the techniques you taught me, I took a breath and I realised that I could handle whatever information I was given in that office. And I was just like, so cool. Yeah.
Oh, that is terrific. Incredibly gratifying when you can reach somebody like that and they go out and do it. And then they tell you the story. They're like, this is how my life changed.
Well, yeah, because it's possible, you know, and just like yourself, you know, I really enjoy hearing what you have to say about things because I know that you've lived those things as well. And I remember, I think it was Wayne Dyer saying, if you want to teach resilience, life will give you things to be resilient about. And it's like, how can I sit there and say to people, these tools and techniques can help you through the toughest times if I hadn't gone through what I went through, you know, that with that initial circumstance that led me to learn meditation, or watching my mum die in 3 weeks from diagnosis to death and watching her suffocate and going through a divorce and like all of these things. You're like, you know, it's like this invitation to say to people, what knowledge can you bring to others through overcoming the adversity in your life? Because there's always going to be other things to face. And we're all, you know, as Ram Dass said, like we're walking each other home. But also if I hadn't sat in those 11-hour meditations, if I haven't done a week of silence in America where I discovered so much about myself, and then I'm not quite sure, you know what I mean? Like, I think that you end up knowing that when you've walked that path, you can say with certainty that these things work and can change your life. Yeah. Please excuse me, my phone just rang on silent.
Oh, no, you're totally good. And I think one of the things that comes up for me as you're talking through some of this is like this idea that I think people in the middle of struggle, whether it's acute, they just crashed their car, right? Or whether it's, you know, a little softer, let's just say it's the things piling up at the office all day long and, you know, not being able to get ahead or, you know, whatever that is. I think one of the most powerful things that I have found, and I'll say this too, I think about the clients I work with in the golf space as well, like how they navigate through 18 holes where it feels like there's pressure on every shot, or they don't have their A game today, and yet they still have to try and perform at their best, and they're still in competition. They feel the competitive pressure from the other person, even though the only competition really is the course and themselves, and we could go into that. But
right.
But I think one of the most important things that I have found that taking a pause and being silent and quiet and meditating is that it helps to gain perspective quicker when the stuff starts going sideways. I've seen it happen in my own life. I've seen it happen in the people that I work with. If someone can get to the idea that, oh, I'm okay enough with the ball bouncing the way it did. I wanted it to bounce a different way, but I'm not going to die. Some version of like that. And if they can get there like this, then they're standing and they're in the present moment. They're in a much more productive headspace, so that they can do the most important thing, which is the next thing.
Right. And the thing is that life unfolds in moments.
Yeah.
And, you know, in that sort of instance, you know, it's the invitation to notice the green or the grass or the bunker or the how many grains of sand make up that bunker. And without that bunker, I wouldn't have a course. And, without that tree and without and without this club and without, I wouldn't be. So how many other things are going on here? It's not just I'm not just nude standing in the middle of nowhere doing this sport that I love but also causes me to, look at all the metaphors in my life. There are so many opportunities in that moment to bring yourself into that present moment awareness. And like you said, then the next thing happens. And, it's funny because I think that it's like riding the waves of life. Like we learn to ride those waves of life, but do we want a still pond all the time? And we want those, like if you look at a golf course, this is the thing I would ask, like, do you want a course which is just a straight? There's no trees, there's no difference. It's 18 holes of just this. And so if that's what perfection is to people and that's what they want, I actually would challenge that. And I'd say, I actually don't think that's what this is about. Therefore, where is the humor in it, in something? Where is that? How can we see, like, I have this picture of myself when I'm 3 years old and she's unwrapping Christmas presents and she's so happy. And I often think, how would she feel if I was speaking to her the same way that I speak to myself about something that I perceive is a massive mistake or is a massive, I think I would speak differently to her. And I'd say, you got this. This is a journey. This is what we're here for. It's exciting, and what's around that corner, and how do I adapt? So I can try something again. This is really interesting. And
it is the very struggle that is the way, right? And the Stoics knew that, right? The struggle is the way.
Yeah.
It's what makes us. It's what shapes us.
Yeah.
And I think having a different relationship with that struggle, and I think that's what's hard for a lot of the people that I work with. And these are super accomplished people. They have businesses, or they're doctors, or they're they're so successful in other domains, and they get onto this golf course, and they really, really struggle. Their language around this sort of winning and losing, this binary, this duality, right? It's like, if I don't par or birdie this hole, I'm a loser, or that language really creates a lot of struggle for them. And I think once they change that language for themselves a little bit, it's like, can you learn from it? Made a mistake. Can I learn from it? And yes, you can.
Totally. And it's that invitation to see that blind spot. That I refer to like a groove in the record. Yeah. We have these grooves in the record of our existence that the needle just jumps to as a default. And so the default might be, I'm not good enough, or the default might be, oh gosh, I can never do this right. And there's an invitation there to notice that groove in the record and to start making a different groove. But you're going to notice when that jumps to that same track. You go, the more that you create what I call a daily practice, the more you become aware, that needle's jumped back to that familiar groove. And I would say, is this reaction or this thought a nourishment or a distraction? Is it moving me towards or away from where I want to go? And have that honest conversation with yourself. So, because in the end, that's where it starts. It starts in those micro changes and those micro moments of awareness. I've defaulted back to that. Okay, I noticed that. How can I notice that without judgment? And then bring it back to what do I want to create? And maybe that's the whole purpose of that specific, say for instance, they go, this specific 18 holes, I'm just going to notice where my needle goes to. Where does it drop into what groove is it going into. You could even write it down on a notepad.
Right.
So without judgment, we're just noticing what is my default mode network. And then through that awareness, you sit down and you look at it and you assess it, and you whatever you need to do to make adjustments. And then I always say, just use yourself as an experiment, like a science experiment. So, yeah.
That's interesting that you say that too. I like the idea of the lab, metaphorically putting on the lab coat. And this is something that I teach. It's like, all right, can you be as objective and say clinical as the researcher, the scientist? People get stuck in outcome, right? They're just thinking about, did I get it or not? It's the binary, right? And so if I didn't get it, I'm terrible. Well, and they put a lot of emotion in there. But what if you put the lab coat on and this whole thing was just an experiment on your journey? And it's like, okay, well, and then you got curious, right? Well, okay, this happened and this was the result, and so maybe I can learn from it and understand it. I don't have to bring a lot of emotion. And, to your point, like, I'm thinking of like the good wolf or the bad wolf, which one you feed. Like, it's the battle that we all have up here, the two wolves up here, right? It's like, well, who wins, right? The good wolf or the bad wolf? Well, it's the one you feed.
Yeah. And it's like, well, what is that good wolf? Because a good wolf isn't passive. A good wolf is also, it's like we talk about surrounding yourself with the good front row, and they're the people that hold you accountable, but the good wolf keeps you accountable as well in your own life too. So, we were talking about putting your big girl pants on and stuff. Like sometimes we have to address things that can feel uncomfortable, and sometimes that is our habitual thoughts and reactions and the way we show up. And there's just so much opportunity,
For sure.
Yeah.
As we kind of come to the top of the hour here, I'm curious, what would be one thing you could, one prompt or one suggestion you could make for somebody considering starting a mindfulness or a meditation practice in order to help them to show up at their best inside of a performance domain?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, just commit to sit, because we talk about discipline in so many areas of high performance, but so many people can't sit alone with themselves with their eyes closed for 5 minutes. And so I would say that's a fundamental part of high performance. So commit to sit, to know that you can just do 16 seconds to start with. That 4-count breath that is often taught, like box breath. So the way that I would encourage people to do that is through the nose, just looking at, if you use your imagination, which I will use a lot as a tool, but seeing the breath entering the nose down past the throat into the stomach, and then see it like expanding like a balloon, and then back up and out. And then as it goes out through the nose, just see it like dissipating into the distance. And if you can do that, then you've done 16 seconds. Do that 4 times where, it's a minute and so I would say just commit to sit. Do it of a morning to start with. RPM is what one of my teachers taught. Rise, P, meditate. But you want to catch it when the brain waves are still coming out of that theta state. So you want to sort of make sure you're in that theta alpha of a morning when you're coming out of the sleep. And so that's the prime time to do it, so that the horses haven't bolted. But, guided meditations can be really great as well. But I think definitely just that commitment, just sit, just start the day, feel your feet on the ground, take that breath down through the nose into the stomach, watch it back up and out and watch it. And that would be an invitation, I would say, to start the journey anyway. Yeah.
That's perfect. I love that message. Well, we're gonna take that one to my folks in the golf community. I love that.
Yeah, please do.
I'll
have to record a meditation for the golf community. Let me know what the needs are. We'll get one done for Insight Timer.
I will do that. That will be great. I've got some things coming up, so I will take you up on that for sure.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, Cinzia, I want to thank you so much. This has been great. I have so many more questions. This means we have to do another one of these, So.
I would love that. It's been such a joy to talk to you, and I love your presence. And I'm honestly listening to the first chapter of your book. That you said I'm in. It's really wonderful. It's very well thought out, and there's especially in these realms, you really tune in straight away. Like this light goes off within you when, people have this incredible offering, and it's, there's in the realm, there can be some, Oz's behind the curtains. So when you tune in and something lights up within you and engages you, it's definitely something that we, lock onto, the sniffer dog locks onto. And so,
nice.
I just want to encourage people to have a look at your book as well. And, you're such a blessing, you're such an authentic soul. And very, very grateful to have met you and to know you. So, yeah.
Of course. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. By the way, so you're talking about the very first chapter. The chapter is about James Stockdale and what happened to him and the people who were under his charge in the Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam. And it's a very famous story, obviously, but did you know that Bob Schultz, our friend Bob, studied philosophy in the same program at Stanford?
Oh, did he?
20 years apart from James Stockdale, had the same professors. And late in Stockdale's life, Bob got to know him and his wife and tell some great stories. So the next time you talk to Bob, you'll have to ask him about Admiral Stockdale, which it's all epic stuff.
I know next time we talk, I'll have to talk to you about when I met Bob and I was running late. I never told him I was driving from Los Angeles. So that's why I was stuck in so much traffic. I didn't want him to think that I didn't want him to put off a meeting because I wasn't closer to Coronado. So
gotcha.
He's such a legend. He's such a blessing. Yeah.
No doubt. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hope you have a great holiday. Looking forward to catching up soon.
Definitely.
And like I said, I'll have a lot more questions, so we're doing this again.
Thanks, mate.
All right.
Bye.
Okay, that's a wrap on this podcast conversation. Cinzia Lee, wow, that's awesome. All the way from Perth, Australia, the most remote city in the entire world. Thanks, Cinzia. Lots of great things to think about. I love this idea of a warrior mindset. I really appreciate Cinzia's idea of, hey, can you just take a minute, take 60 seconds and prepare mentally for that thing that's in front of you? Who does that? Right? It's so simple. But if you do that, I think you have a lot better chance of not only bringing the skills necessary that you want to bring, but also to bring the mental and emotional wherewithal and intentionality to that moment as well. And that gets you through the challenge, that gets you through the pressure of the moment. So great conversation, really interesting person and background. So Cinzia, really appreciated the chance to do that with you. So once again, I'm Paul Monahan, and my mission is to help you lead, play, and perform at your best, no matter the circumstances, no matter the situation. If you want to learn more about the work that I do, you can visit my website. It's at paulmonahan.com. You can find information about my new book, The Most Important Game, Play Better, Struggle Less, and Enjoy More. You can find it there at the website. If you're watching on YouTube and you enjoy the conversation, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing. And if you're listening to the podcast, please hit the follow button so you don't miss an episode. I want to give a shout out once again to our producer, Kevin Monahan. Kevin's doing all the good work behind the scenes to bring you this podcast on the audio and on the visual side. So thanks again, Kev. And until next time, remember, stay in the game. Don't give up. No matter the performance domain that you're playing in or you're performing in, it is possible for you to play better, struggle less, and enjoy more. See you soon.